Right, Jeff, we said we were going to talk about women's cricket in greater depth, professional women's cricket, not so much what was going on last week in the tournament that Maeve was playing in, although let's hope one day that standard of cricket does become professionalised and all the rest of it. The England-New Zealand series that's taking place at the moment, we talked about the T20s last week. There have been 2 one-dayers, the first of which was at Bristol on Thursday. England didn't bat particularly well, but still got 241. Jess Kerr,
same goes for both games, really. They were both instances in New Zealand managing to cock up the chase when they should have been able to avoid it.
I think the difference with game one is that 241 still felt, like the average score for England in a winning game when batting first since the 17 World Cup is 247. So if you want to use that as par, Australia way ahead on 289, by the way. New Zealand down at 207 in a first inning. So, 241 is still a useful score. But yes, you're right that New Zealand didn't bat well. Heather Knight, 11 short of a century in that first game. So her hoodoo continues with one-day century. She's only got one of them at Leicester, where we're going tomorrow. And that new ball spurt, Jeff, with Brunt and Siver. The new white kookaburra doesn't swing for long, but it does swing loads at the very start. And Brunt bowled 4 maidens on the trot, which had me rushing for the record book and thinking about Phil Simmons to Pakistan that night. And
Joel Garner.
And we actually found out for an England woman the best or the most economical figures for a 10-over spell was Beth Morgan, who was obviously more a bat than a bowler, who took, I think, 3 for 4 from 10 overs against the Danish team in 1999 or something.
The might of the pastry merchants.
Yes, but no, she wasn't able to quite finish it in that respect. But yeah, Amy Satterthwaite was batting at 4 and Devine at 5, which has been a source of some annoyance to me. I think, not annoyance, that's the wrong word, but I think that, batting them 4 and 5, I get they've got huge responsibility on their shoulders with Bates opening. It felt to me that from 17 for 2 after 10, they were never going to win the game, and that's when Satterthwaite at that point, Devine's not even batted. She comes in at 30 for 3 from about 15 overs, and the probability of the winning from there is so low that it requires almost a miracle. Whereas if they were batting in the top 3 together, then maybe they can lay a foundation. And I know that can backfire too. The new ball can get out good players, and they're left with that quite soft underbelly. But yeah, I think they've got the balance wrong.
It feels like insurance policy cricket from them that they know they've only got 3 batters in the top 6. And I know I've been getting stuck into the New Zealand women's team a lot. And I don't want to be unkind about it. I would love them to be doing well. I wish they were doing well. Then I wouldn't be grumpy about it. But they just don't have the cattle. They've got... They're filling out, it's Sally's gap filler through that top order. I mean, Lauren Down opening the batting. She had her first ever good domestic season this summer. She's never had one before, and somehow she's still been in the New Zealand team. She's a very good fielder, but she's got a shithouse record with the bat. She's made 2 50 over hundreds in nearly 10 years playing the game. It's... the fact that you've got to choose players who haven't been able to perform even at domestic level in New Zealand, and, let's be frank, that's not the highest level of women's domestic cricket going around. If you're not dominating there, then if you want to be a proper international standard player, you need to be dominating at that level, and they don't have players who are. So their options are pretty limited, and they have to keep putting players like Down in to open the batting when she's probably not got the chops to do it. Someone like Maddie Green, who, is one of the few players in their side who can hit a 6. She can make a clean connection and go long, but she's someone you want to see coming in at 7 in a T20 game with 2 overs to go, maybe more than you want to see coming in up the top, hoping that she's going to build a long innings, because she doesn't have a record of that. She's got a very poor record as well, and Brooke Halliday sort of trying to make her way and has had encouraging signs even in these last couple of games as well, but got out at a crucial time in the second game. There's just so much fragility to their batting that how can they possibly try to put a team together?
Yeah, I share most of those thoughts. With Down, she's made a 90 against Australia, and in 14 other one-day innings, her high score is 22 or something like that, and that was yesterday. Until then, her high score was 16. So a really choppy start to her journey. As for Maddie Green, I mean, it's not like hasn't made important contributions, whether it be for the Brisbane Heat, that T20 at Hove last week. I mean, she can clearly do it. She's got a rapid 100 at international level, albeit in that Ireland game when they made nearly 500, her and Amelia Kerr. But yeah, it doesn't feel quite right. It doesn't feel quite right. It's like they never replaced Sarah McGlashan. Which is a pretty long time ago now, isn't it? And you consider how much cricket she played for New Zealand and what a champion she was. So, and that's probably not doing them a service either, but you know what I'm trying to say. Or Rachel Priest, for that matter, who had I'm not saying she had an extravagant international record, but someone who was on the T20 circuit, a consistent match winner at that level. Still is, absolutely, still is, was playing in the 100 recently. So, the first game, Tahuhu's return from triple surgery on her foot. I mean that mole that they and I'm going to explain it poorly here, but I'll do my best. That looked pre-cancerous. They cut it out, and that in turn led to more trouble inside her foot, which required more surgery and more surgery. So she didn't play the T20s, but she's back for the one days and hit the stumps twice. Bowled Siva, bowled I want to say Amy Jones. I think in that first game was economical, was a yard quicker. Hannah Rowe picked up a wicket early on as well for the first time in like 7 one-dayers. Hannah Rowe picked up a wicket, which I felt happy for her, because I like Hannah Rowe as a point of difference, nice and tall, moves the ball away. So, yeah, Devine and Satterthwaite did the best they could, and the margin was 30 runs in the first game was somewhat padded out by the fact that the last two combinations put on 68, with Tahuhu and Lee Kasparek smacking some runs at the end alongside Satterthwaite, who ultimately was left stranded on 79. So, a pretty scratchy game all
with about 4 overs left as well. I mean, it's a real indictment when you look at, had they even batted through their innings, they might have pitched it.
I think you're right. Yeah, just too much work there for Kasparek, who got run out in comical fashion too, which made my commentary sound comical because I kind of called her as being in. Because I read the body language as her cruising over the line, thinking, well, she must be in. They might look for overthrows. I went upstairs and she didn't even stretch, let alone dive, and she was out by an inch, and they lose the game. So there's a. Yeah, it sort of bolsters your point, Jeff. They're not quite there. The second game, however, look, let's say, and this is really crude way of seeing it, but New Zealand probably need to play a 9 out of 10 and England a 7 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 to win at the moment, for they are so mismatched. Mm-hmm. And it looked like that's the way we were trending in the second one-dayer. England's top order misfire again. Beaumont leaves a pretty good delivery from Devine that shapes away and cuts in and hits the top of her off stump. They've rested Catherine Brunt, so they don't have her to rely upon. She was very good batting at 7 in the first game, making 40-odd after a collapse of 4 for 31, but she wasn't there. They used Danny Wyatt as the swing player in the middle at number 7 in order to play one fewer bowler. Wyatt playing her 200th game for England, and they really needed her, Jeff, because soft dismissals from Dunkley, from Siva, from Jones, all caught in the onside. I think Siva was caught in the offside after Knight got out first ball to Rowe. Again, that outswing I mentioned before. And at one stage, it was 146 for 9, and we're thinking, well, New Zealand are chasing 150 here. And then it was Danny Wyatt who made her highest score, Jeff, in one-day international cricket in England, which seems remarkable to me, given she made her debut more than a decade ago. And she did it alongside Tash Farrant, who made 22 out of their partnership of 51. And that is a really great story. Farrant, who was in the original contract list back in 2015. She made a debut in 2013, had to wait 8 years for a next one-day international, got dropped from the international list, back to semi-pro cricket. There wasn't even a semi-pro structure with the exception of the Super League when she lost her contract. It's done so well in the 100, so well in the Rachel Hayhoe-Flint for the South East Stars that she gets back in the England team, takes the new ball, but also shows with the bat that she's going to take every opportunity. So I love the Tash Farrant story, and I think she's probably just about done enough to be in that World Cup squad already, with that point of difference being a left armour.
It is really interesting, and it's a women's cricket thing specifically, that when you go to franchise cricket, as we've talked about on the show a few weeks ago, so many of the players who would be the lower order are actually batting middle order or even top. You sort of Dane van Eke opening the batting in the 100, players like Eccleston and Brunt batting in the top 6, Sarah Glenn for their franchise teams, and someone like Farrant does that kind of job. So comes into the England setup and is an 11, in the same way as the Australians will bat down with Wareham, and, Jonathan may be coming in at 9 or 10 when she's just about got a test 100 to her name. It's pretty interesting that the tail doesn't mean the same thing in for the better women's teams going around, for some of the strugglers it does. But for Ferrant coming in, that didn't mean here's a rabbit. That meant here's a pair that could put on some runs. And I just sort of had a feeling they would watching that game. I mean, Wyatt looked really good. She had a couple of dicey shots that chipped over the field, but she kept attacking but judiciously. She didn't go after everything, but she also didn't let herself get slowed down to a crawl when the wickets kept falling at the other end, even though she was at 7 and she's bounced around the order so much for England. She's been at 5, she's opened, she's sort of been all over the place and actually didn't make many low scores in 50 over cricket before she got dropped after her last, she made that 100 in Malaysia 18 months ago or whatever it was, and then I think she had 3 bad games in New Zealand and that was pretty much it.
I think it was just the inability to kick on with her starts. And that's now Winfield's problem, by the way. Winfield hasn't made a half century since 2016. Yeah. Winfield Hill, I should say. And she got out in a comical run out with White when they were both reaching for the same end. But, I mean, the way I see this England team, there's maybe 2 spots available for the World Cup. I think there is an opening spot that's there to be taken by somebody, be it in the top order being promoted. And maybe it should be Amy Jones. She's averaging 15 in her last 10 one-day internationals. Now, as we both know, Amy Jones is class, probably the best keeper in the world at the moment, certainly warrants her spot in the England top 6, but given she isn't going that well at 5, maybe giving her a chance to bat with the field up and a chance to go up and over the top of cover, her best shot. She absolutely dominates domestic cricket. I see no reason why... it's just, run of form, bad run of form, it happens, sure. But a bad time for a bad run of form might be the way of putting it ahead of a World Cup. So there could be the Amy Jones option, but a specky that we're putting out there at the moment, I say we're, like it's a campaign. A couple of us are saying...
Got to go to India.
Georgia Elwes made 100 last week, made 85 not out yesterday, a couple of days ago. And yeah.
Georgia Elwes, it's like bringing back W.G. Grace. It's like bringing back the Model T Ford. Aren't we done with Georgia Elwes?
Here's the thing. Georgia Elwes is only 30. She's in career best form. And this is the key point. That World Cup's being played in March and April.
Yeah, but she's in career best form, but the best of her career wasn't very good. So...
Well, but this is kind of the same point I made around Tash Farrant. There wasn't, until recently, you couldn't go to the level below and do as men have done for 100 years. Go to the level below, dominate, get back into form and push for a spot again. I think Elwes probably thought her international days were numbered, but she's finding form at the right time. They are already through to the final of the Rachel Hayhoe Flint on next weekend, on Saturday at Northants. If they go and win that, she makes runs again, given she is very technically correct, there might just be an argument that she could be in the offing to be one of the openers. If this Pakistan series doesn't go ahead, that's a bit of a shame, really, because that would have been 3 more games to have tested it out, then the Women's Ashes, then the World Cup thereafter. So a lot of cricket through the winter for England. So that's one spot. And the other spot, which I didn't really think of this when considering Danny Wyatt, but maybe it is number 6, number 7. On the count of the fact that maybe England don't need to play 6 bowlers. Because usually they balance up with Brunt at 7, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe in some World Cup games they'll need to. But if they play Brunt at 8, 9, 10, 11, and Siva as the 5th bowler, and Knight as the 6th bowler, perhaps you can get away with Wyatt batting at 7 and Dunkley batting at 6, and you've sort of got 2 finishers then. It feels like Wyatt's too good a cricketer to not be part of the thinking for that World Cup. And I'm not sure whether she's got the form line to get another chance as opener. So maybe it has to be at 6 or 7.
And when you've seen someone do the job well, if she's come in and played brilliantly at 7, do you then sort of do what every Australian selector does and say, well, we better pick them as an opener? We'll put an opener at 7 and a 7 as the opener. So maybe that is her spot. Maybe... But it's interesting what she was there to do. She was there to come in with 8 overs left and cart around the attack in happy hour. And instead she had to save the day. And she did. She did it really well. And she played the sweep shot well. They weren't facing a whole lot of spin, but she played it reasonably, which hasn't necessarily been her strong suit. It didn't look like she was craving that new ball pace field up that you often see a long-term opener want in white ball cricket, and they can look a bit marooned when they come into play with fielders back on the fence and the older ball. Yeah, I'm not sure whether she needs it anymore. Like maybe her game's advanced to that level when she can moderate her game. So
up and over cover, right? So women's cricket, 4 outside the circle, not 5. And that makes a difference because usually it means mid-offs up at the death because you've got 3 out on the leg side by default and probably a deep point. Wyatt's best shot is up over the top of extra cover or mid-off. It always has been.
Yep.
She's great through point as well, but she hits the ball inside out that way so well that that is always open to her in the final 10, almost always open to her in the final 10.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so if they have a deep backward and a deep cover, say to put extra protection on the offside, then she's got a gap on the leg side that she can exploit. You
rarely see it, do you? Yeah, you rarely see in any form of limited overs cricket. You always have 3 out on the leg side at the death, right? I mean, you very rarely in men's cricket it might be 3 and 2 or 4 and 1. You're never going 2 on the leg side, 2 on the offside, or 3 on the offside. So. I just think that might have been a timely intervention from Danny Wyatt as we build up towards the next World Cup cycle. How about Kate Cross? She's got 31 wickets at 16 since 2019, since her big recall, which is the most in the world since in that frame of time. 3 wickets again yesterday, super consistent. Speaking of which, Sophie Eccleston, I mean, every day, isn't it? Give Sophie Eccleston the ball, invariably takes wickets, picked up 2 in 2 at Bristol, and again picked up Maddie Green the moment she came into the attack yesterday. I've been doing some campaigning again, Jeff. Sophie, her brother, James, or Jimmy, or Jumbo, I think they call him, his teammates, Alvanley Cricket Club made the Village Cup final on Sunday, which is like a lovely old competition. I think it was the 50th running of it this year, where they play at Lords. They play to the decider at Lords. No concerns with that. But it really did highlight to me how preposterous that Jumbo Eccleston's playing a final at Lords and Sophie's never played there. I mean, does that blow your mind? Sophie Eccleston, the best bowler in the world, has never played at Lords. So I put a thing in the cricket paper this week saying, it's a pretty easy fix, isn't it? Put an annual limited overs game at Lords for the England women. Like, they had one between 97 and 2013. They haven't played a game in London since the 17 World Cup. That's, 4 and a bit years since they've even played in London, full stop. Why not just have an annual one-day international there? You would absolutely, if you build it, they will come. We see that with women's cricket all the time. You get a good crowd.
How crazy does it have to be? Oh, how wacky. We're going to have a whole game every year that's for the women to come and play. If they can keep their roving uteruses inside their bodies, they can come in through the gates of Lords. I mean, it's just bizarre that it even needs to be put in those terms.
Well, it's yeah. I would caveat that by saying it's not really an MCC. Remember, the MCC does the scheduling at Lords, right? And it's not like they're trying to keep women off. I mean, a lot of 100 games this year, MCC games and so on. It's more just the fact that there's been a decision taken at ECB Towers to prioritise smaller venues and pack them out. And that makes sense, right? You've been to Fortress Chelmsford a couple of times with me. Like, that's a proper experience. 5,000 people going wild at a T20. That is proper atmosphere. Likewise, Taunton, when they get it right. Hove again. But it just like... And people will say, well, why is Lords special?
For something
they say, why Lords, why not Manchester, why not Leeds? I would simply say that whether you like it or not, Lords is the spiritual home of cricket. And it would be a great symbol, I think, to young girls watching. And we've had Izzy Wong commentating with us. It's amazing watching the young girls come up to Izzy wanting autographs and wanting photos and whatever. It's so brilliant, seeing that next generation come through. I reckon it wouldn't be a great thing if someone like Izzy Wong, as she invariably progresses to international cricket, is just as normal for her to play at Lords as it is, maybe not just as normal because there'll never be Test cricket there, well, not in the short term, but that she doesn't feel like it's a big deal rocking up at Lords. Like, it's kind of I've played lots of times there.
Yeah, it seems completely straightforward. And no offense to your Middlesex slot, but if Stevie Eskenazi's rocking up at Lords every other week to play in third div, surely they could get the England women on for a game or two in a season.
Yeah, and look, again, it's not about either or. It's not about Middlesex or the existing fixtures. It's just about like one game per year. They've found room this year for a number of 100 games, right? So one game per year that the England women play. I think you make a set piece event around it. You give it the full treatment on free-to-air television, Sky, radio, everything around it, right? You funnel all this energy into one day per year when the women own Lords and the England women at that. And, then you see, I mentioned Izzy Wong. What about Charlie Dean, for example? New to the England team, brand spanking new, really good bowler. She was an amateur cricketer at the start of this year. She said no to one of the semi-pro contracts at the Vipers because she was studying. She went from being amateur to, obviously, the London Spirit, now into the England team, a match-winning four for after that rain delay, beating the outside edge, beating the inside edge, with flight, with hard spun deliveries, gives it a rip when she wants to. I think she's 20. I mean, this is generation next right now. So, yeah, thinking not really about this group of England players, but thinking about what it might look like in 5 years' time when they're running the show. And, all these young kids are watching them on television through the 100 and through the international game and hopefully, normalising the idea of playing on test venues again.
Yeah, I can't really add anything else to it. It seems insane that it's not happening, that they're not doing it already, that isn't part of it. Why not? I totally understand the small venues thing in terms of atmosphere and that it works most of the time, but why not give yourself that room for ambition that administrators have had with the 2017 World Cup final, with the 2020 World Cup final at the MCG. Why not?
Antigua as well for the 18 final. Remember there was there 15,000 at that, if I recall correctly. They filled the Viv Richards Stadium. We're off to Leicestershire, Derbyshire and Canterbury to finish the season there. So again, smaller boutique venues, but I'm sure they'll do a good job as hosts. Rachel Hayhoe Flint finals at Northants on Saturday. We've got the Sparks and the Diamonds playing it at Scarborough on Wednesday in the semi-final of that competition. Jeff, I think overall England not going that well. New Zealand going even worse again.
Yep.
They don't really look like defending champs to me right now. They have got huge room for improvement. And New Zealand, at this stage, I doubt they'll make the semi-finals of their home World Cup. A lot needs to change there. And part of that is because I look at across the pond, as it were. Well, not across the pond in this case, but I looked to the series that's being played at Antigua at the moment. South Africa, they're the sleeping giants at the moment. They're ranked number 2 in the world for a reason. They pumped India 4-1 earlier in the year in March, and they've just thrashed the West Indies 4-1. They were up 4-0. They actually lost the 5th game in a super over yesterday. But I think we are permitted, Jeff, to get excited about South Africa's prospects at this World Cup. I don't think it's like you and me talking it up anymore. I think it's actually a real thing.
The South African women's cricket team have got to go to India. They have all got to be on that plane. They're all playing that well. They could do something at this T20 World Cup. I've always felt that they were sort of almost there, but not quite. Like the way they went out of the last couple of ICC tournaments felt right. It felt right that they weren't quite good enough to beat England in the semis in the 17 World Cup. It felt right that Australia were too professional, too well marshalled, and got past them in that rain-shortened match in Sydney in 2020. Like that felt like about the level where South Africa belonged, but they keep kicking on, and they've got this. Yeah. I reckon it's a bit of an 06 Socceroos golden generation sort of thing for South Africa, because they've got DVN, they've got Cap, and they've just got better and better as players, and then they're bringing along this other cohort with them.
And the thing is, they're doing it both ways. Like they are making big runs and winning easy, and they're also winning those tight ones. So the 4th one day might be the most impressive of the lot. They only made 185. Mignon de Pree made runs. It wasn't Lizelle Lee, it wasn't Danae van Niekerk, it wasn't Laura Woolvart, who've all made runs through the series. It was de Pree, 36 years old now, Jeff, maybe even a fraction older. She's been around forever. And they kept the West Indies to 150 for 9 in 50 overs. It's Van Niekerk 3 for 23, but Mazabata Class, who hadn't influenced the series to that point, 2 for 25 from 10. You look through the wickets, Van Niekerk 8, Ayabonga Kaka 6, Marizan Cap 5, Sune Luce 5, Shabnam Ismail 4, Nadine de Klerk 4, 3 in the final game, then Class 2. That is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is 7 genuinely capable match-winning bowlers. Then with the batting, Lizelle Lee has made 595 one-day runs this year at 99.2. Now ranked number 2 in the world, just behind Daly, who's number 1. Laura Woolvart's made 400 one-day runs this year. She's taken the next step. So, it's golden gen stuff, right? Like, we saw Van Niekerk at the 100 this year. Cappy likewise. That's definitely part of it. But it's like the second part of it.
Throw in Dupree and Lee and Ismail, and you've got like such a good core. And it's probably now or never time for them, in that they've got two World Cups in quick succession, basically. They've got the 50 over and then the 20 over the next year's one.
Which they're hosting, which is in South Africa in 2023.
So they've got, a couple of opportunities in the space of a year, basically, to get a piece of silverware. And if they don't do it now, there is going to be that slip as those older players start to go. But they do have the talent coming in from the other direction because, Teen Wolf is not a Teen Wolf anymore and has decided not to be a doctor for the time being and is going to keep making shitloads of runs. They've got Nadine de Klerk coming through who's been so impressive at times, and then these developing talents like Kaka and like Klaas who, they've been fringe players in the last few years, but they're starting to develop more of a standing of their own. So if they can have a subsequent generation coming through to supplement and gradually replace the golden gen, then they're looking good.
Yeah, I think if you were doing like a depth chart, I would say that they are more likely to make the World Cup final in England right now. And that probably, and that sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? Because England have done a fantastic job of regenerating their next generation. We've already talked about their semi-pro setup that South Africa don't have. But yeah, this group of South African players feel like they could theoretically pinch the World Cup. On a good day, they could beat Australia. Because, we price it in that Australia are so far ahead now because they've lost one game since the last World Cup. And that's true. Yeah. But, limited overs cricket, part of the excitement is that you can't win all the time. And I reckon the team most likely to knock them off are probably South Africa as it currently stands. So, yeah, a bit of a watch this space there. And it's got, obviously we've been huge supporters of theirs on the podcast for years as well. So I acknowledge our bias in this respect, but I've just got a feeling about them. Speaking of the Australian women's team, Jeff, they start their multi-format points series against India at Mackay on Tuesday, probably after this podcast has gone out, the first of 3 one-day internationals. They had a warm-up game on the weekend. I saw Rachel Haynes made runs. Pooja Vastrika made runs for India. That's exciting. The idea that she was going to be an all-round, going to be a bat, then she was going to be an all-rounder, then she was going to be a fast bowler. Now maybe she's a batting all-rounder again. A utility, Pooja Vastrika. So
the Danny Southern of the Indian cricket.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly when she was growing up. She said, "I want to be the Danny Southern of Indian women's cricket." That'll mean nothing to our fans outside of like Melbourne. But Footscray are in the grand final this week. The Test match starts on the 30th of September at the Gold Coast at Carrara, followed by 3 T20s also at Carrara. Scacey will be there hopefully on the 7th, 9th and 11th of October, I'm pretty sure it is. So Scacey and all the boys will be down there watching the women's cricket. Scacey will be there too.
He'll be parachuting in from Metricon Air.
I haven't really got I haven't done a huge amount of thinking about this series, Jeff. I know you'll be covering it extensively. I suppose from an Australian perspective, they'll be thinking the most important leg of this is the one days off the top, given we're that close to a World Cup.
And given they get to keep pumping the streak, so they're up to 24 from memory.
Yes.
And I mean, it does tell you how variable white ball cricket is, that 24 matches in a row is a record and a pretty imposing one, but it's not actually that many games. If you were a great Pakistani squash player of the 50s, you'd expect to win much more than 24 games in a row. It's.
Do you think that? I kind of take a different view. I feel like 24 in a row is remarkable because of the volatility of limited overs cricket. Like
that's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. It is so volatile that 24 is a big number.
Right. Yeah. We're okay. Right.
In other sports, 24 wouldn't necessarily be a big number, I'm not going to get into the trap of trying to provide examples that will almost certainly be wrong, but it's not a huge total given how easily. I'm being very incoherent about this. It's late and I'm tired, but you understand the point that I'm making. It is volatile, and they've managed to be good enough to stay ahead of the margin of that volatility. I sound like Matthew Hayden now. I'm having a full Matthew Hayden moment.
While you've been
processes.
While you've been going around in circles, I picked up a new pink cricket ball, Winnie's toy. I'll hold it to the camera. The reason I raised that is that Elisa Healy's been talking during the week about the prospect of playing an annual women's test match on the first weekend of November, so I suppose Melbourne Cup weekend traditionally, where it would be played at North Sydney Oval, a pink ball 4-day test match, and that just to be a standing part of the calendar in much the same way as the Boxing Day test, to use her comparison. I asked Susie Bates about this on the broadcast the other day. She's all in favour, as is Sophie Devine. Of course, neither of them have played a test match before. I heard Meg Lanning was asked about it by Gerard Whateley on his program the other day. Every month and every series that goes by, Jeff, we are getting closer and closer, I think, to women's test cricket being an unstoppable force. I mean, obviously, it'll take a long time before it's normalised across the board, but when I say unstoppable force, I mean the very fact that there will be more of it played outside of the big three. I don't think it's going to be sustainable to say that at the Women's Ashes thing, and maybe it's the India thing periodically, and no one else, it does feel like that the drawbridge is lifting somewhat.
Yeah, and if South Africa are coming, why shouldn't they play a test match? And if we're going there, why shouldn't we play a test match over there? I think it's something that's always much more likely to happen in the big three countries, though, even if it's not necessarily against big three opposition, just because of the cost of putting it on. I don't think South Africa, Cricket South Africa doesn't have 2 coins to rub together at the moment, given the absolute disaster of a few years they put themselves through. New Zealand,
but their women's team. But whilst that's absolutely true, their women's team plays shitloads of cricket. So, I mean, I feel like South Africa might be the country most likely outside of the big three to volunteer themselves to it, even if they haven't got shekels to rub together. It's kind of more around the idea that they've got an appetite for more. Not less. And look, even at the moment, right?
Well, maybe they can do it at a lower cost. Maybe it's not going to cost the same kind of astronomical amount to put a match on in South Africa as it would in Australia or England.
They can play it at Benoni if they need to, the Benoni Hazelhurst ground in Johannesburg that you and I have been to before. But this series right now, both Bates and Devine have said this could have been a multi-format series, right? Given they're here for quite a long time. The challenge being that they want to get as much one-day cricket in because they're near a one-day World Cup, and New Zealand have lost, I think they've lost 18 of their last 19 one-day internationals, so the more one-days, the better. But, it's going to be 5 years between 5 years between one-day World Cups. I know COVID informs that, but, it's a long gap between tournaments. I know Andy Zaltzman in the past has argued that we need to have more women's tournaments full stop, as in fewer bilateral series and maybe a tournament every year, every second year a T20 and every second year a one-day World Cup. And if that were the case and we play more of the more of the white ball stuff and the pink ball stuff, no, it would be pink ball, white ball stuff, at tournament level, it might, again, strangely, it might open up some space for Test cricket because you wouldn't desperately need to play 5 one-days because you would be invariably playing more of it anyway as part of the championship and having World Cups more frequently. So you might find room to find a space for Test cricket to prevail. So anyway, there's lots of good energy around it right now, put it that way.
Lots of vibes, good vibes.
Lots of vibes, good vibes.
Much better vibes than there were a couple of years ago when, the James Sutherland regime was saying, why do we even bother playing 50 over cricket? Let's just go to, what about T10? Have you girls thought about T10? Oh, it's nice and short. Women and children can understand it. Thankfully that's gone. And we have India playing Test cricket now, and I think that's massive. So, look, fingers crossed.